that's not really the e-commerce that I would be pitching to people who actually do want to be making that much money, want to be working for themselves, want to be, side hustling into a full-time gig that they have all this freedom and stuff. It's just such an important step, and I think the majority of people miss it. Oh, that's a good question. I was thinking about this last night. Did I give up? No. Did I work on it? No. But did I quit? No. We can be really hard on ourselves, our patience level for finding success, comparing ourselves to other people.
What's the state of e-commerce and what do people really need to watch out for?
What it really means to live life golden. Yeah, we're golden, baby girl, we're golden. They're about to see us shine, cause we're golden. They can't ever break us down, cause we're golden. They're about to see us glow, cause we're golden.
Pivotal Conversations is focused on creating a seamless and convenient method for brands to create content in the modern age. We cover everything from strategy to production, to post-production editing, to create all your short-form content, as well as social media strategy and your website strategy. So if you've been thinking about starting a podcast, or you've got a podcast and you're looking for a seamless, convenient way for you to create your content and get it out there to the world, we are offering 50% off your first episode. So if that's something you're interested in, there will be a link in the show notes. Fill that inquiry form out and we'll be in contact within 24 hours. Thanks, guys. Elyse, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
Really excited to chat to you today. E-commerce is, and it's quite new in relation to the business landscape if you look at the long term, but it's still evolving very much, and you are playing in that space, and doing a lot in there. And I know that a lot of our listeners are, either e-com founders or, I feel like it's made it a lot easier for people to enter the space as well. So I'm keen to dive in and really, unpack your knowledge and your experience and the wisdom that comes with that, and have a conversation about and potentially helping some of the audience as well.
Absolutely. I could talk about this for weeks, so I'm super excited to jump in.
We might start with your journey. I think when I actually can't remember where I first seen you, but I was like, oh, wow, the experiences that you've had previously, and then going into consulting and coaching in that arena, if you didn't already have a lot of experience, I think, working on many brands at once, really rapidly accelerates that. I'd love to start with your journey. Where did it begin in business? And, we can kind of dive into that.
Yeah, amazing. I'm originally from America, so you'll probably hear a mixed accent here, but I moved to Australia I just wanted to live here after uni, and so I just had a little bit of money and just needed to land on my feet. And so I'd always kind of dreamed of running my own thing, but I just got into a tech startup. It was called Rewardle, way back in 2015, and we were just based at like 100 Flinders Street or something, so just bang in the city. And we were a tech startup that was trying to help small businesses with their digital marketing, essentially. But the way we were doing that was basically a piece of software that would allow them to kind of do what Woolies and Kohl's were doing with the loyalty program, and kind of digitize their buy 10, get one free punch cards. Because, if you're at the bottom of the Telstra building and you're selling 4,000 coffees a day, or however many bags of beans that is, and you're just loving life, but then as soon as there's a water main break in the building, or, people are not there for Easter, or the weather goes super sunny and they want iced drinks, like there's just all these factors that people weren't really capitalizing on to kind of actually grow their business and then make it a sustainable business. A lot of people were just coasting, and this was cafes, this was gyms, this was really any small business that didn't have access to the kind of level of digital marketing tech that some of the bigger brands would. So that we were just trying to, cultivate that technology and give it to them. And so I was literally responsible for like 180 small businesses in the CBD. So I got to know Melbourne really well. I got to work with so many different businesses, so many different business owners, so many different backgrounds, and also I'm just trying to educate them on how digital marketing could be really powerful for their business. And the level of pushback is actually astounding. I don't know if it, because a lot of the technology was free at the start. We just wanted them to trial it, and I would do a lot of tech support, and then trying to get them to use it to the max, and then eventually convert them to actually staying on and become paying subscribers. So I went through like the customer journey, and a lot of what I was trying to do for them, I was then having to do, where I was like, okay, we need to start sending emails to our customers, so we need to start writing blogs. And so it was this really like meta experience where I was getting a crash course in digital marketing. You know, obviously I was fresh out of uni, so I'm kind of prime millennial who's using all this technology myself. Then I'm also trying to sell it and explain why other people should use it. So it was just this really fast, interesting experience. And aside from doing all that, I actually had a lot of time because the CBD, everything's so close. I was just hitting my metrics way faster than anyone who was like in the regional areas. So I would hit my KPIs, kind of double them for the day, and then be like, all right, well, I think I can sign off now. And I started doing all this research, and right around the time Shopify just started putting out tons of content. They had all these people just being like, I started a matcha store in 7 days. It made $1,300. Here's you can do it too. And they would just have their employees creating businesses, and it just caught my eye. And I think I did some like vagabond workbook, which vagabond basically means like you travel and work. And it was like exactly what I wanted to do: travel, make money, live this amazing life. And it showed you how to pick a product. And so I spent a couple hours one afternoon doing that. And I came up with this amazing like pet adventure business that I just spent the next like 2 months working on and launching. And it used drop shipping and tripwire products and all these fancy kind of buzzwords in the e-commerce space. And it just got me so hooked. And it was super hard. Like I did eventually end up selling the business, which was awesome because Shopify had a little exchange. So sold it for a very small profit to someone who had more time, because I had actually gotten my dream job at Thank You at the time. They were like the company I really, really wanted to work for. But it kickstarted this passion on the side.
Did you say Thank You?
Yeah, Thank You.
Oh,
so,
beautiful.
Yeah.
We had Daniel.
Yes, Daniel Flynn. Yeah, I love his podcast. He's incredible and an amazing storyteller and passionate individual. And so even before I moved to Australia, I had interviewed there for an old job while I was still in uni. I just don't know how I found out about them. Must have been when I was on exchange or something. But I was just so passionate about using business for good. That was kind of, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but that was really where I was starting to get to, was like, how can we create win-wins using the way the world works? Like I went to uni with a lot of bleeding hearts who were like, capitalism is bad. And I'm like, no, actually, I don't think there's a better system yet. It's like, we just need to figure out how to use it for better. I got a job at Thank You. Meanwhile, I'm running this side hustle selling backpacks, booties, life jackets for dogs. And like, it was actually a huge niche. I would still love to get back in that space because I'm a big dog person. But I was just learning everything, cutting my teeth. And then at Thank You, I was assistant to the head of marketing, the chief marketing officer there. And under her was someone who was running e-commerce, and they had left. And I said, well, I actually do this on the side myself. Do you want me to just keep an eye on this, keep it running until you hire someone? And then long story short, I ended up becoming the e-commerce sales person, so head of e-commerce there. And that kind of then catapulted me into actually just doing that full time for the rest of my career. And it's always just been a really interesting journey, because e-commerce is so ever changing that what I was so passionate about outside of work, researching, going to events, running my own businesses, experimenting, I found every single day I'd come into a meeting, in my full-time job, whether it was at Thank You or whether then eventually at Frank Green, and Minor Figures was in there in the middle. We'd be having a meeting and be like, oh, actually, I read that, and I saw this other brand doing this. And then it felt like like everything was clicking into place, which was really interesting. So that just kind of, the journey just went crazy, from there.
That's an awesome journey, because I think you're obviously coming from a different starting point in a sense, right? Like it's like one of those things where, and I mean, in the early days of Shopify, kind of seeing it, being like, oh, what's this? What's going on? I really want to learn this. And then all of a sudden you kind of get this opportunity, and that opportunity is, then allows you to enter the e-commerce space probably when it was, taking off and becoming, large and businesses are starting to shifting. A question that I have is, what is the difference between the side hustle and then, Thank You and Frank Green? And so is it the same principles, or is there a big difference in how those businesses operate, or is it just, a larger version? Like, what's the difference? And what do you carry across from, say, being the solo founder, it is that side hustle, to then going, okay, well now I'm, in charge of a global brand, and we're managing global operations.
Totally. I think the biggest difference is just the team. Like the number of times, I think I'm a massive generalist and I've always been really decent at a wide range of things, but I'm never gonna go to the Olympics or make the varsity team. That's how I always describe it. So I think there's probably some skills in there like strategy and stuff that I probably could, but I think, in terms of, do I design websites? Yes. Am I a graphic designer? No. Do I post on social media? Like the number of things that I cover without actually, how like figuring out HTML, but I'm definitely not a full stack developer. Like there's all these things. So I think that having a team, and both at Thank You and Frank Green, there was actually a lot of us that overlapped because we worked with just the amazing amount of talent in the people that worked at both of those companies. And some of us were lucky enough to kind of stick together and work at both companies during different time periods. And they're just incredible at what they do. So being able to have a creative team where you brief in, okay, this is the concept for our Black Friday campaign. These are the non-negotiables from like a sales and a marketing perspective. And then having someone be able to run it through world-class tone of voice and copy, then world-class design or, gifting packages or special. So I've done the numbers. I know what commercially is going to work and I need you to help me connect with our audience. Being able to hand that stuff off, or, okay, when I was at Minor Figures, there was an amazing operations guy, and I feel like operations is really hard, so it was just life-changing for me, where I'd be like, I think we should do this, this type of merch, and this is going to help our average order value increase, and this is going to, solve a problem and differentiate us from Woolies and Kohl's, so we don't cannibalize our sales channels. And he'd make it happen. He'd be like, okay, cool, those can be here within 4 weeks, or those can be here in 3 days, or he thinks they can make it happen. So I think it's really nice when you're in a team like that and in a big company. Not to say that it's not still flying by the seat of your pants. The foundations are still there in terms of experimenting, test and learning. Often the risk can be a little higher in terms of dollar value, but then it's not your money as well. So it's like, when you're a side hustler, you're doing everything yourself. I feel like when I was side hustling, or I'm sure everyone else feels like this, you just feel like you hit the walls of your own limits and your own expertise, your own skills. Like the number of times I was like, I just wish I could get someone to copyright that for me. Or I wish I could, and you can to an extent get support and mentoring, but you can't drop $5,000 on a sales page copy or product descriptions or something that someone, freelance might charge. So I think the biggest difference for me was team. And having the breadth of those skills, and everything else was very similar in the the way you would work. It's still messy. It's still it's never perfect inside of a big company, but yeah.
Yeah, it's a really interesting. It's such an interesting concept. What you just said then is like the idea of, and I think this is even talks to like almost how you have to scale a business is like you start off and you actually really need good generalists, and then as you get bigger, you can start to narrow skill sets and get people to focus on those one things. Like, and I think that's such a interesting concept for business owners in the beginning, because like I know that's like you would be experiencing that now. Like if you like, especially in what you're doing, like being a generalist is actually probably helping you a lot now. But then at some point, you need to bring in those really honed skill sets.
Absolutely, and I think that's where I think I was listening to an episode with Paul Waddy the other day, and he was saying like it's the e-commerce market at the moment, it's a lot harder to scale than it's ever been. And I find that with a lot of my clients. A lot of them are starting out or have very small teams, and getting over that hump to be able to get them enough revenue where things are working and then they can start to hire out and specialize. That's a really challenging kind of inflection point to get through. But once you can kind of navigate from that side hustle to then being able to specialize a little bit, I feel like it does get a lot easier.
Yeah, and speed, right? Like you can go a lot quicker once you get to that point.
Absolutely.
It's just tough getting there.
Yeah, exactly. And you got to manage your money right. You can't just hire everyone.
What's the state of e-commerce right now then? Because I find that this is it's a really interesting time in the world. We're probably leaving one business cycle and heading into another. What's the state of e-commerce, and what do people really need to watch out for?
That's a good question. I've been thinking about it a lot, especially because I think it's easy to, when you're in it, to get stuck in it. And then when I've tried to recently kind of zoom out a lot and go, what's going on and what's been going on in the last few years? Because when I'm looking at month-to-month metrics or year-to-year metrics, it's easy to go, oh my God, we're totally failing. And then go, no, actually, we need to look at it on a larger scale. So I think I think a lot of people are saying, oh, e-commerce is oversaturated or e-commerce is harder because you can't just run Facebook ads at the moment. And it's like, actually, I think e-commerce is still super, super, super lucrative. I think there's no better time to get into e-commerce because there's been pros and cons in every time. So if you were like a Showpo in 2008 who just nailed your ads, but you probably didn't, it was probably really hard to create a good website at the time. You're a multi-million-dollar brand now, but now you have all of these tools that can help you set things up. It's just a little harder to kind of nail that marketing because the algorithm is changing. So I think people just need to really, really focus on getting the basics right. You can't just put up a junk website with just some fad product that you kind of researched maybe on Amazon or something, or through some, web hacky type of idea generator, and then just get a whole bunch of traffic through Facebook ads. Like, you need to have the foundations really set, which is something I've been working on with a lot of my clients lately and doing personally, actually. I just think the foundations need to be stronger than ever. You need to be building a brand, you need to be solving problems, you need to be having passion. So I think a lot of the fluke growth hacky success that people could see before isn't there. Having said that, I do think it's still an amazing time to be in e-commerce, and the growth is still coming. It's still a powerful space to be playing in. I just don't think it's as maybe easy to kind of hack as it was before.
Is there a more emphasis on product, do you think now? Like, can you because I think I get what you're saying in the terms of, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, you could be marketing centric and you could grow and become massive. And I think probably now it's not as easy on the marketing side. So do you think that it's more, okay, you just need to really refine your marketing and get back to basics? Or do you think it's more like, okay, well, you actually need to have a product that's solving a problem or a product that there's a need for, because you're not getting away with, your 5-cent clicks and your cost of acquisitions.
Totally. I think there's just, whenever I Google like e-commerce on TikTok or something, all I get is just all of these like really spammy people being like, I made $30,000 last month and here's how you can too. And here's all, you got to find this cool mushroom lamp. And then 4,000 people searched for it on Amazon. So I found it in China and then now I'm shipping it. And then all you got to do is that. And it's like, okay, good job. I'm really proud of you. Really stoked on all that money that you're making, but like, it's not, that's not really the e-commerce that I would be pitching to people who actually do want to be making that much money, want to be working for themselves, want to be, side hustling into a full-time gig that they have all this freedom and stuff. I do think it comes down to the product that you have, which needs to be a problem that you're solving, that you're really passionate about solving, first of all, because if you don't have that passion, you're just going to burn out. And I don't know, I'm sure there's someone out there who's super passionate about selling like glowing mushroom lamps, totally fine, but you need to do that and like do it better than anyone else. Don't just find it because you think that's going to make you a lot of money, right? And then I think once you've got that product, got that problem that you're solving, you're super passionate about it, then making sure you're really clear on how you're solving it better than anyone else. Because I think it's so interesting. I travel a lot between Australia and America, and when I go back, like for example, Ulta. I'd never heard of Ulta, which is this massive beauty brand now. It's kind of like a Mecca or Sephora. When I left Australia, when I left the US like 10 years ago, it wasn't there. And now it's like this big box retailer. It's huge online. Everyone's ordering from it. And I'm like, how did they do that? And I feel like I don't exactly know their whole brand story, but it's just an example of a brand that I thought that was saturated. I thought we had our Sephora, we have our stores, and no, they just came in, and Adore Beauty did that here actually too. So it's like, there are opportunities if you find them and then you go hard down those rabbit holes. It's not to say you have to come up with something totally unique that doesn't exist. You just have to solve a problem and then do it better than whatever is currently out there. So that could be skincare, that could be clothing, that could be anything that exists already, and you can just do it. So I think that's like kind of the basis. And then from there, there's definitely nuances around the marketing where it's like getting that messaging right, not just shouting about your product and why it's so great, but actually understanding where your audience is at, what you need to say to connect with them, fostering those relationships, and then providing an amazing experience. So I think there's like 5 or 6 key pieces, but those 3 like foundational ones, the product, the passion, the problem, like super important.
Yeah, no, I love that. So you mentioned a key part there, which is better, right? And I love that. Because can you define how how does a product do it better than somebody else? And then talking to because the way I look at it is there's human needs, right? And then, your product has to meet a need and solve a problem and then do it better than, say somebody else. Can you define better, or even provide an example of a company that's been able to come in and do something better? Because I feel like that's where you can really penetrate the market. You only need a corner of the market to actually get the business moving. Can you define how do you make a product better than, say, how someone else's would, or even we can, talk about an example?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. I don't know if I've actually really thought about it, because I think that's where the marketing comes down, is how you communicate why. I'm wondering if it's really better, if it's just different and maybe specific, because you can talk to two people and one product is better than the other, and then the vice versa, right? So it's about kind of serving the problem that person has. And the reason I say better as well is because working at companies that were always so socially focused, sustainability focused, environmentally focused, and then obviously Thank You's a social enterprise, we could never just get away, and we never tried to just get away with this, I should caveat. You can't compete with just a green message or just a socially focused message, right? You have to have the best product on the market. So in that case, the hand soap needs to be, competing with Aesop at a better price point, available in grocery. There was all these kind of metrics you're trying to achieve, be really effective, provide an amazing experience, have beautiful packaging, and tick all those things, because you can't just say, oh, but we donate 100% of profit, so you should buy from us, because they're not buying, they might as well donate $7 to a charity versus paying $7 on a hand wash that then, once you actually get down to profit, that's what gets donated, not the $7. So I think that's where it comes down to just figuring out what problem you're solving. And so if that problem, let's say, for example, Yeti is a really good example, because I think people don't realize how niched they were when they started. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, but they literally started with just coolers for hunting enthusiasts. So in America, they went and they were, in, I don't know if there was Facebook groups, but small groups that were really passionate and had a need to keep their goods colder, safer, sanitary, longer. And so they saw this need out there. They nailed it, and then the feedback from the customers was, okay, this is amazing. And then they expanded into, REI and online. And then they now are the coolest, insulated cup, and they make all these other things. But it started with just that technology of that solved the problem of, okay, we need to help create a technology that then keeps our deer meat fresh or whatever. So I think Yeti's a really good example, because when you say, how do you do it better? The first things that come into mind is, IP, technology. Is there, even if you're a service provider, are there proprietary frameworks that you can be, focusing on what your process is, whether that's creating something or whether it's how you deliver something, having those defensible elements that you solve the problem better. So I think that's what it comes down to. If you can get down to the level of IP, great. Otherwise, it can be things like customer experience and the problem that you solve, doing it in a way that feels better, I guess, to your customer, and they think they rate it better. And I think it can either be scientifically we know it and we have all this data to back it up, or we've talked to 100 of our customers and 98% of them or 100% of them say that it solves this problem. So I think it just comes down to that.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
No, it's that's why I asked the question. I think that answer is spot on, because it's almost like the communication. You kind of said it earlier on, where you were you have to find that little corner of the market, that niche. And, you look at any brand, they always start there. Facebook was for uni students to start off with. And because that's how you can make penetration. Because if you start off too general, it's you don't cut through, right? You need to first convince someone to buy your product. Yeah. So it's kind of what you were saying. And that's, I wanted to kind of gauge how you thought of it, is okay, you can find that corner of the market. You can then communicate to that corner of the market specifically, and your messaging, and you even build your product to fit that market, and then as you get a few customers, you can start to, innovate a bit more and maybe go for a different customer as well and start building for them as well. I love that.
Absolutely.
The thing I love about the conversations I have is I'm fascinated by how people look at business, because I think like fundamentally there's a set of principles that we all know are true, but then what humans are great at is starting to think about it in their own way and have their own personal touch. If you were starting from scratch, how do you think about building an e-commerce business, right? So, what is your process, or what are the things that you think are really important from the start? And how would you grow a business? Like maybe what are the first things that you look at? And then, how do you think about it more on a macro level as well, like over a 5-year span?
Yeah, it's been really interesting because I've built several businesses, but then I've also been testing a lot of the same stuff that I've been doing, like I said, from the side hustle into the, amazing teams and being head of e-commerce at these big brands. And and then now being a consultant and a coach, I've been thinking, particularly the last 2 years, of like, what is the formula? Is there, everyone's out there pitching a success framework and this and that other thing, and me having to sit down and go, okay, what is my formula? Is there one? Because I think listening to, I don't know, I've listened to like every episode of like how I built this, right? And like one key takeaway on how to get a successful business is there is no one right way. So I like I said, I've been, we were talking about before, I'm trying to package up a course that we'll be launching in a couple months that shows people exactly how to start from scratch and launch their own business. And the things that I've come down to are similar to what I was just describing, which is figure out what problem you want to solve, one that you're super passionate about solving. Because I think I've definitely gotten distracted in the past of trying to solve problems that aren't really there, or just selling a product that seems really fun, or a brand that I can envision. Like there's a number of times when I've sat down to do the metrics on a brand that sounds so cool, and then like when I run it through, I ask myself a few questions in terms of viability and stuff, and it's like, oh, that's going to be a lot of work, and it's going to be not much money, or the amount of work I'm gonna have to put to kind of get to the customer is gonna be so much work. So like, let's put that on the shelf. So I think if I was starting now, the first thing I would do is figure out what problem I'm really passionate about solving. And, or I should say the other part of the problem is there might be like, fashion founders out there, or those kinds of businesses where it's actually aspirational. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a problem. It could also just be like a void that you're filling to help get someone to an aspiration. I should say that. But what I'm really passionate about solving. So in the future, it'll probably be a pet related thing. I definitely will launch another brand eventually, and it's probably going to be dog related because I'm super passionate about that. So I'll probably look in 10 years time or 5 years time, what's the state of the market? What are people out there doing? The dog food brands at the moment are insane. You would have thought that was a saturated market, but it's not. Product, what I'm super passionate about solving. And then the kind of next level that I go to is, who are my people? Figuring that out, talking to them. I think so many people are just like, I have this idea, I experienced this problem, I'm gonna launch it. That doesn't mean that it's not gonna work, but you're gonna make so many more mistakes just using yourself as your target customer than you would if you actually went and talked to 100 people or even 1,000 people, or and collected information about that. So deciding you're really clear on who your people are, then actually talking to them to make sure you're not missing anything. If nothing else, even if you're nailing it, you'll get a lot of really great lingo and messaging that they're gonna spit back at you that you'll be able to then like using your marketing, so that makes that easier. Then getting that product right. I was saying before, I've had a couple people in my DMs recently starting stuff up, and they're like, oh, I'm just having a lot of trouble with supply and operations. And I think post-COVID, it's been huge. And a lot of them are like, oh, I just might do that first order and we'll just see. And I'm like, no, launch, like get that product like nailed down. Because what if you sell out on your first day and you've just shipped out 100,000, 1 million units of something that's terrible? that's a waste. And then the final piece is profit. So I'm making sure you know your numbers and you're not launching something that's not profitable.
Hey guys, if you're enjoying the podcast, could you please go and leave us a 5-star review? Our mission with this podcast is to provide education and lessons from business leaders and founders for absolutely no cost. And every review we get and every bit of support that you throw behind us allows us to secure bigger names, bigger guests, and have amazing conversations. I really hope you enjoyed the episode. Thank you very much. Team, just a short break. I want to say a massive shout out to our major sponsors, BizCover. They are a big reason why we get to do what we do every single week. These guys are professionals. They care about your business and they care about the business and startup community, which is something that I really love and a reason why we chose to partner with them. And plus, they make the process of getting your company insured super seamless, which is really important with such a tedious process. I've been a customer now for 10 years. I have made claims. It has been super easy. As I said, with such a tedious process, these guys are the best in the business. As part of the Startup Diaries community, they have given us a promo code, which is Pivotal25, getting $25 off your business insurance policy. Make sure you head over to bizcover.com.au. The link is in the show notes. Get your company insured with a great company. We'll head back to the episode now. I want to go back to the first two. So you mentioned surveying people. Is the order? So are you surveying people to figure out the problem that you're solving, or like the void that's there? Is that kind of that process?
Potentially. I think it just depends on where you're at. If you really have no idea what you want to do, what problem you want to solve, or what product you want to make, I think a lot of people have things that they've had ideas for in the past. So typically when I start talking to people, they already have ideas they need to validate. But if you're really, really stuck at the start, like that vagabond worksheet that I did all those years ago, you can definitely start talking to people. Start talking to people. Like if you're really passionate about tennis, go into tennis forums and stuff and say, what's your biggest struggle at the moment? And people will be like, oh, I keep losing my tennis balls. Okay, like, you know what I mean? Whatever it is. And you can start to really work from there. Typically, I do find most people have they have an idea and they're already like making a logo and making a website and ordering product. And it's like, actually, did you talk to anyone about if they're in the same boat as you? Because chances are they are, but there are a lot of mistakes you're going to make, whether it's in design, whether it's in finances, whether it's in price point, whether it's in color scheme. Like it could just be all these little things that if you just talk to 5, 10, 15, even like ideally 100, 1,000 people about it, and I think I skipped that step. I chose e-commerce because I like doing things on a laptop that I see instant results from people without having to talk to anyone. I really like that side of it. So I skipped this step a lot. So it's my biggest lesson that if I were to start over again, I just need to get out there and talk to people, whether it's online or whether it's standing out in front of David Jones or whatever. It's just such an important step. And I think the majority of people miss it.
Yeah, and then you talked about, like, obviously, so you're taking that information and building a winning product in a sense, or like a product that's going to fill that void. Like, that's obviously, like, when you say that, I'm like, yeah, it makes so much sense. But how do you actually do that, right? So, like, I mean, and I know there's the kind of operational side of it, like you've got to find manufacturers and these kind of things, but more, I would say, from a feature perspective, or like it could even be the design of your product. I find that's really interesting, and it sounds like you're really honed in on that side of it. Like I've spoken to those people. This is kind of the information they've given me. How do I then take that information and then, like, not build my product, but wrap that around my product so that it is going to help fit those needs? You kind of talked about it, like let's say we're using the tennis ball analogy, and the tennis ball carrier, like it's obviously like logo, the packaging and these kind of things. Can you talk about those and how you take those inputs from people and then, turn that into a product? Because I think that's what can make a product special.
Absolutely. I think a lot of founders do have an inherent sense of what would make them different. So a lot of this stuff feels organic, and it's just about really validating that with data, because I'm a big data person, and I think e-commerce is quite a scientific method. It's literally just experimenting, testing, and learning based on a hypothesis. So the more kind of scientific you can make it and data-driven you can make it, the better. So I always kind of say, don't act on that hypothesis, right? So if your hypothesis is, okay, I'm gonna leave the tennis balls because I don't know enough about that.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna go back to the Frank Green, where I had like the reusable cups and stuff, right? So they were there. Keep Cup was there. Frank Green was there, kind of two main players, and they were both the ones that got featured in the War on Waste documentary, which catapulted both of them into massive levels of success. But they had both been tackling things from a different angle and building and experimenting with things based on a problem they were trying to solve. And then on the Frank Green side, they had kind of this look and feel that they wanted to be really sleek, almost kind of emulating like an Apple or something like that, where it's like, it's sleek, it's cool. And then you had Keep Cup, which again, I can't speak to exactly what was going on behind their heads in either of these people, but you see the different product, right? You had something that was glass and it had more customizable kind of colors and things that would pop on and off and different shapes and different approaches. So I think, one, it comes from the founders and how they're approaching the problems. Two, it comes from then actually, again, the scientific method: test, learn, experiment. Okay, I want something that keeps things hot, keeps things also cold somehow, looks like a really cool laptop, and looks nice on my desk, where someone else is coming from it with a different set of values. And if you're stuck on what boxes you should be ticking, again, you look back to the problem, but then you can also look at the positioning of your competitors, look at, whether it's other cups on the market or whether it's other solutions on the market. What are they doing right? What are they doing wrong? Where are they lacking? Are those areas that they're lacking that you can improve upon and then would make a difference? And then that's kind of where I go. So there's so much kind of data to look in, and then you start to trust your gut and go, I want to create a brand that does this and the product does this, and here's my non-negotiables. And then once it starts to come to life, you test and learn from there. Okay, we tried that, but that actually means that it slips from my hand because it's this material, so we got to switch to that material, or oh, then this is actually leaking, so let's fix that. And the way the technology then played out for both of those companies is fascinating, because they're not the same in any way, but they're both kind of coming at it from this mission of, we want to help reduce plastic waste and create a more sustainable future. So I think that those examples just inherently will show you, like, you're not going to create something exactly the same unless you're looking at them and saying, I want to build a cup brand. Then you're going to copy them. But if you're going, I want to solve a problem, and I find my Keep Cup does this, my Frank Green does this, I don't like this, and I want it to actually work for camping, you're going to come up with a different cup. You're not going to come up with the same thing. So yeah, I think it goes down to just being really clear on who your people are and what problem you're solving, and you're inherently going to come up with something innovative.
It's so true, because it's kind of like the Samsung versus Apple debate kind of thing.
Totally.
Like, they're just,
they speak to different people.
Yeah, literally. And then, then the marketing that Apple did, where there was literally the comparison, like the two people talking, the messaging coming from that. I think it shows that you're right. Like, and I love how you kind of say, who are our people, because that, as you said, it kind of does dictate how the product's built. Is it sleek in design? Is it, like Apple's whole thing is, I think it's beautiful in simplicity or something like that.
Yeah.
And then, like Samsung is very much feature orientated, so the person who wants the better camera and values that versus the person who values, what Apple does as well. So
absolutely. And I think the biggest problem, like, if you can nail the concept of your, sustainable competitive advantage, which is, when I go back to the drop shipping example, what's to stop someone from finding that cute little mushroom lamp that's going viral and doing the same thing as you? Like, there's nothing defensible there. So yes, you're making $30,000 a month or tomorrow or whatever, but what's to stop you from then losing the buy box and you're out of it the next day? So building that brand is really powerful. But then I think people fall into the trap of that their marketing is their competitive advantage. And so that works, but again, it's not as defensible as having like IP or technology or things in your product that no one else can recreate. So I think GoTo's an example, great example, because they have products that are really hard to emulate, and they solve a very specific problem, which is simple skincare. Really well done, really easy to understand, easy to implement, but then their marketing's awesome. But if they were just like every other brand with their products, and then they had this really cool branding, they'd probably be still pretty successful. But I think that extra, like the fact that they've got both just makes them almost unbeatable. So it's really interesting. I think a lot of people, when you ask them, okay, so what's your unique positioning? And they're like, oh, well, we have pink packaging and then we do this and we're really fun with our tone and we're cheeky and whatever. And then it's like, that'll work for a little bit, but it's not as strong as it could be if you really made sure the product and the problem you're solving and then the people who it's for is really nailed down. So I think that's where I've gone back to the drawing board. And it's applicable to any business, actually, service, coaching, consulting, anything. But for a product base, like I will spend so much time on that next time. And it doesn't have to be like years, like a perfectionist thing. It's just get that right and you're going to be laughing.
Yeah, that is such an important, like, because I think you only learn that once you've been in business for like a while, because you start, like, it's like you can never compete on price because you got to like, it's almost like how do I make sure that my product or service isn't a commodity?
Yeah.
Right? Like that's the key. Because like, and again, like that's what keeps you in business for 10 years and not just 3. Yeah. You know what I mean? And that's why I think what you just said then is like probably one of the most important things ever. If there's one thing you can learn is like, what is the part of your product that is a commodity? And is there one thing that you can do that nobody else can replicate?
Yeah. And I think that's where so many people they're trying to be too many things and they're trying to do everything. So one of the biggest pieces of advice I give to the business owners is focus in. You do not need to be making TikToks if your audience is not on TikTok, So if you don't know where your audience is, then that again goes back to the foundational people element. But I think they spread themselves too thin and they think they have to be doing this, have to be doing that. So when you say, okay, what's your proprietary technology and what is it? They don't have it because they're trying to be everything to everyone versus being, the cooler that keeps deer meat cool for hunters. Like that is so specific. You wouldn't have thought that now that cup is in almost every store that I walk into. So it's a really interesting concept. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. And then, so the last piece to that was the profits, right? Which is, I mean, you would see this, so much, but again, like just such an important piece to the puzzle. Can you talk to what you mean by that, right? And the different inputs, because, how does someone understand how to price their product so that it is profitable, and what kind of things do they need to be thinking about to make sure that they're not running into a brick wall for 5 years straight because they're not making money on their product?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people just kind of price a little bit randomly, and that's not anyone's fault. I think this is where the business degree finally does come in, or the working in a sales team and getting these kind of formulas sent down to you. No one knows like, I can be making, it's a 15% margin grocery and 30% margin wholesale, and then, 60 or 70% margin on e-commerce, as a general rule of thumb. And no one knows that, right? So they're just kind of like, oh yeah, it's a $30 product and I buy it for $18, and it's like, oh, we're getting, and oh, how much does it actually cost to ship, and how much are duties, and, are you going to be international? Where are you selling? Oh, actually all your customers are in WA, so I think it gets a little bit messy because people kind of they work backwards from where they should be working from. And so I think having an idea of like how much does it cost you to create this product, first of all, and then checking that with how much you think your customers are willing to pay, how much they have said they'd be willing to pay, and then if you can actually test that behaviorally somehow, that would be great, based on testing ads or something like that. But if you're coming up with an $80 solution, but the ballpark range you were getting from talking to your customers is $20 to $30, you might be stretching it. So you might have to figure out, I need to either find new customers or level up the value here or create a cheaper product. So that's kind of how I start, is like, okay, where are the suppliers getting to? Then how much is the minimum order quantity? You need to be aware of that, because if you found an amazing supplier, but it's a $500 units versus 5,000 units, and then how much you would need to sell to break even. Because if you need to sell 1,000 units, you can literally know exactly how many people you need to be driving to your website to sell that many based on, certain benchmarks and percentages. And so I think people just think, okay, I'm going to buy 100 units. Hopefully I can sell them. I'm going to drive traffic to my website with ads and Reels and TikToks. I'm going to do all these things. And then it just gets really messy. But if you actually just stick with the numbers, okay, I have a $30 product. I bought it for $10. That's a great margin.
Yep.
It costs $5 to ship. I'm including free shipping on my website, which is going to increase my conversion rate a little bit. And then I need to drive, 100,000 people to my website to sell my minimum order quantity, then I break even. Like, you'll have all of this numbers out there that will actually show you whether you can afford to even set that business up. Because if you only have the money to do your minimum order quantity, you're going to know, okay, all my marketing has to be free. Is it realistic to get 100,000 people to my website for free? No, that's going to take me a year to do it, even if I'm hustling every single day. And so I think it just gives you these like boundaries within to work within to know, okay, yes, I'm ready to do that business, or no, that's actually going to be a lot more work than I thought it was going to be. So like, to put that all into a story, I had like 3 friends and we came up with this really cool surfing kind of rental idea. And it was just like, we were just, to use a surfing term, like frothing it. We were just so excited. We're like, this can be so cool. And we can envision it. It felt like hot and sexy and like, oh, this is going to be so cool. And it's going to be so fun. And the people we'll get to partner with. And we were just so many miles ahead into basically the marketing space, which is where people often get caught up. And we just were like, okay, cool. We're all really interested in this. Let's sit down and I think we did like a little bit of a business matrix, which if, you can print out worksheets online about them. I've turned it into a bit more of a viability checklist that I use is what I call it. And it just everything, again, I break it into people, product, profit. And when we did the math, we were like, oh, this is what people would actually want to pay for the cost of running that business. It was going to be basically nothing. So we were going to be working our butts off, and it was going to be operationally and financially really challenging. So we almost saw the best case scenario was nothing. Like, it was like a 5% profit margin or something just stupid. So we kind of all got our reality check by looking at the numbers. We didn't end up running with that business, but we were ready to. We were like, let's get a logo. This is what it's going to be called. I had like mocked up a little bit of a pitch deck thing already, and we were getting so far ahead of ourselves until we did the numbers. And then we're like, okay, best case of what people would pay, best case of what it's going to cost, didn't compute. So I think if people skip that step and they're only like looking at their cash flow forecasts or their profit and loss projections, which maybe sounds scary. It's not as scary as people think it is. You can literally download free templates off of, I have free templates, but there's also ones on like the Australian government website. It's not as hard as you think it is, but if you're not across it, then it's, it can just be a really rude awakening 2 years down the track when you've been working so hard on something that best case scenario isn't going to work.
Yeah. And it's like, 100% understanding the economics, and also, like you said it then, the viability, like is this actually worth my time for the next 2 years?
Yeah.
Because, can we generate a 30% margin? Can we generate that 40% margin, which is, a great business that is it possible?
Yeah.
And more importantly, what's the journey to get there, right? Like, I think that's such a key part as well. So, are we able to touch on some of those inputs though? Like, what are some of those things that people need to be thinking about, like, gross margin, these kind of things? Do you have rules of thumb? Is it more, you're trying to maneuver all of them? What does that journey look like in an e-commerce business over a period of time?
Yeah, absolutely. I used to build these like little calculators, which will be a part of my course when it launches, because I was like, this is just too confusing, and I like doing it. But I know that it blows other people's brains. But it's just these little calculators that show you, I could throw out a bunch of benchmarks, but basically, okay, you've got how much you're going to sell your product for. Are you charging shipping for it or not? Like, you shouldn't be, but if you have to, fine. Then you add that. So you have all the incomings. Okay, and then maybe there's a discount. So maybe you have a welcome discount. So you've got a $100 product, you charge $5 shipping, and then there's on average going to be a $5 discount or something like that. And then so okay, I'm going to have $100 coming in. And then you go, okay, what's my cost of goods? So that $100 product costs me $25 to make. Subtract that. Okay, how much does it cost me to ship? It actually cost me $15 to ship. I'm just not charging that. And then and any other little kind of expenses that are associated with getting it to the person. Then you get your gross margin there, and then you take off all of the other little things later. So, do you have lawyer fees? Are you running ads? Is there a marketing cost? So there's all these other little expenses. But I think e-commerce, you should be able to get easily, like I as a very simple rule of thumb, again, just keeping it super simple for people who want to action it tomorrow, 50% price increase on your product is what I would do at the bare minimum. So it's like, if it's bare minimum, just do that if you don't know what you're doing. Like, that should get you into a safe space. And then from your costs, again, once you subtract everything out, it depends if you're just an online only, or if you have a wholesale side of your business or retail side of your business. Typically, like, blended margins, I would look at, again, I would want my business to be operating at like 30% profit kind of at the end of the day, because then there's always unexpected costs that you're not going to realize, especially when you're starting up, whether that's accounting fees, legal fees, little stuff that you want to reinvest. So I think the more profit you can do versus just spending all that money, the better. So people might disagree with me on that, but yeah, I try and keep it like 30% at the end of the day. That's how much you should be able to have in your profit account and be reinvesting. And then in terms of other numbers that you'd be looking at, I just think there's like a really common 2% benchmark. So 2% for click-through rates, for conversion rates, that if people are like, how many people am I supposed to be getting to my website? Typically, however many people are seeing it, 2% of that, if they click through, can be as low as 1% nowadays. But if it's lower than that, whatever, that's not working, cut that out, don't do that anymore, or test the content. And then yeah, the conversion rate. So if you get 1,000 people who are seeing your stuff, and then 2% of them are clicking to your website, the 2% of that would then be what you would actually be expecting to buy. So I think those are some of kind of the metrics that I use when I'm just, like, again, finger to the wind starting out. But I think there's not too much that people would be forgetting about, because usually when you're small, there's not that much that you're missing. It's mainly just the cost of making your product, and the shipping cost, I think, is the other thing people maybe aren't realizing to factor into their pricing.
Yeah, super helpful. Like, that's so
very nitty gritty.
Yeah, I know it's nitty gritty, but like, I think like even just under like that is just that was awesome, because I think people can take that away. And I love what you said before. Like, my mind's kind of doing the numbers in my head as you're speaking, but like, you talk to also, all right, charging for shipping versus not charging for shipping. And so what you're saying is, you know, this might be a hack, I don't know, you know, but it's more like, okay, we're not going to charge for shipping, but that needs to be factored into our pricing. And so is shipping included in your gross? Is that, or is it more an OPEX expense?
I've always kind of included it. Obviously GST is excluded from everything, but I've always, in the reporting that I had to do, again, this is kind of just how I was taught, so it might not actually be the correct way, but we always included shipping. And even if it had to be because obviously the shipping inbound it's hard to associate per. So if we could, we usually had a percentage that we would allocate to it. So whenever you don't have a way to associate it like per order or per unit, we just kind of do a rough percentage where I look at either the year or the month, what was the total numbers. So I'd used to chase the finance teams and some of the bigger companies to be like, I just need to see this whole thing so I can find my number, so I can allocate, you know, my 30 cents or whatever it is into my numbers. Especially because it's way easier when you're shipping a pallet of stuff to Woolies to calculate all the margins. When you're doing it by order on e-commerce, it can be a lot trickier. But yeah, if you're a small business, it's usually pretty easy to be across your numbers, because you're printing every label yourself and everything like that. So I typically keep shipping there, because I think it can be a variable cost for what you're putting out. So, and this is where it comes into the customer experience piece and just some of that psychology around like converting people into your marketing. But free shipping has just been proven time and time again. People want free shipping, they want faster shipping, and they just want options. So the more payment options you can give and the more shipping options you can give will always increase your conversion rate, which is really interesting, because some people will actually say, just ship it to me slower, I want it for free. And some people will say, yeah, $10, give me the next day shipping, or whatever the options are. And it's just being able to provide that experience where you're meeting customers where they're at. And that's the big e-commerce thing, is they want it where they're at, when they're at it, like right at this, like it has to be, and it has to be quick. So that's where the whole omni-channel piece comes in for the big retailers. But when you're a small retailer, it's just about options. It's just about giving your customer options.
Is there so I know we're nitty gritty right now, but like I really love this stuff. So and is the reason you're doing that is because what you're saying is the reason that you give those options is your conversion rates would go up, which means your cost of acquisition comes down. So, and then that kind of plays into the reason that you're including free shipping in a sense, right? Like, so you'd rather have that more, I guess, a more fixed cost in your gross than a higher variable cost in your cost of acquisition. Is that kind of the notion?
Yeah,
Or am I just
generally.
like creative?
No, I think what you're saying sounds right if I'm interpreting it right on this Monday morning. But yeah, it's just about like if I can make sure that my conversion rate's at 2% versus 1% by just, taking typically what you would do is when you're starting out, and we talked about price and profit and stuff, you would factor in and go, okay, I have a $30 product, cost me $10 to make, but it's going to cost me $10 to ship as well. Just make it a $40 product.
Yeah.
Like, because people would rather, like, the stats that change on this, but it's always, people would always choose the $40 product over a 30 plus 10. Like, 80% of abandoned carts are dropped. It's the number one reason of losing a sale, but the 80% of them are dropped because of surprise costs at checkout, right? So it's like, you're just losing all these sales and you've spent money to get that person to your website. Just charge them the $40 because it's actually no difference to you. And that's where it comes down. The reason people get stuck is because they have a $30 product, they charge $10 for it, and now they go, oh crap, I want to increase my conversion rate. And I have to say, okay, can we change your pricing so that, and then when you've already got customers and they see you go from a $30 to a $40 product, it's dangerous. So that's why I say look at it first before you launch, factor in your profit and your margins and we'll cross your costs so you can, because people are fine to pay for it as long as they feel like they're getting the value and you're solving that problem that they're trying to solve. So they don't worry. Yeah. So it comes back to like that stuff, right? So you just have to have that number, because I've changed prices with with people before. We just communicate it, and it's never a problem because again, if price sensitivity is an issue in your business, it's again potentially not the right people. So
that defense.
Yeah.
That's what you were saying before.
Yeah.
You don't have that kind of good value proposition there. You're more a commodity.
Exactly. And just I don't recommend price being your competitive advantage. It works for some people, Aldi and stuff like that, but I think that's where it gets a little tricky. So I just recommend being across your costs and trying to bundle them in. And people might say, oh, but it costs me $10 to ship it here and $50 to ship it there. And what do you do about going international? And it's like a whole nother conversation, but just do your best to average it out. Put percentages to things. Look at how much you spent on Oz Post last month versus how much your revenue was. What's the percentage? And then throw that as your, as for all your orders, and it'll even out, right? So I think it just gets a little confusing because that's not the fun part. It's not the sexy part. And then people only realize it once they've launched and they're now printing out Oz Post labels. They're like, oh crap. Now I'm having a business that's either a lot less margin or potentially unprofitable because it's not that, the shipping rates aren't that good until you're shipping 1,000 units a day. So, it's something I always had to work on. Yeah, it's tricky.
Yeah, and you might, that's where like the time horizon comes in as well. I think like the reason I wanted to go there with you on that was because that's for me the real skill of business is like there's a relationship between all of these things. I was hoping to get that from you because I can see that's how your mind works as well. Like
totally.
There's a relationship between all these moving parts, and once you can start to understand that, which levers to pull.
Absolutely.
Which is awesome. That was great. We're going to move into quickfire now, which is some base level questions that we ask. The first one is, what's one piece of advice for your younger self?
Oh, that's a good question. I think I was thinking about this last night. I was like, what would I tell myself? I think I would just tell myself to fail faster. Like this concept of faster, and the more you fail, the more you'll succeed. And I think it was the founder of Rewardle, Ruan, he's amazing. I think he said it to me. He taught me a lot of things, but I just always have this implanted in my head, like the faster you fail. And that's not to say do things badly, like don't do that, but it doesn't have to be perfect, right? The faster you fail, again, the more people you talk to tell you have a terrible idea and you thought you were solving their problem. Okay, what's the disconnect? And you can learn and you can grow. So I think just being okay with that, being someone who's always been trying to find certain levels of success or achieve certain things, just being not afraid to just be messy and fail and get into it. Because I think the more comfortable you are with that, the more success you'll find and the quicker you'll find it. So yeah.
Why do you think people don't do that? Like,
it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's uncomfortable. Failing is uncomfortable. Failing is, I think, in our psyche. It's like, it probably goes back to, being cavemen or something. It's just not ingrained in us to handle rejection. I also think I've been talking to a lot of people recently, and they're putting off launching stuff. They have an idea and they're testing and they're learning, and there's so much e-commerce information out there at the moment, and we're contributing to it a little bit. But I think what I try to tell people in the content I put out is like, there isn't a right way. You do have to test and learn. You just have to have that experimental mindset, and it's uncomfortable for them because often their ego or their identity is attached to it. So if you're, putting your heart into something you're passionate about, a problem you want to solve, and you're trying to help people, for that to not work, it can be really damaging to your own identity. So you have to detach yourself from it. It's a hypothesis. Let's see if it works. Let's put it in this bubble. Let's test it out with a certain method and see what comes out. And then let's do it again and again and again. And it's just read the growth mindset if you haven't already. It flips my brain every time it starts to go back in the other direction. It's like, okay, messy, fail. And it's uncomfortable. And you just got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
I love that advice. I just think, I think it's pivotal, but that's great. What advice would you have for someone who's just starting in business?
Ooh, that's very similar.
Yeah.
Fail faster.
You can say the same thing.
I think it goes back to definitely fail faster. I would definitely recommend that. But I think it goes back to be comfortable cultivating that scientific mindset and being comfortable with, okay, I have a hypothesis. I need to figure out how to test that as much as possible. And that can look a bunch of different ways, whether it's talking to people or whether it's launching a website, and then I need the data on the other side of it, that then I'm going to go, okay, what worked, what didn't, was there success? And then I'm going to double that in with now I've got a new hypothesis based on that information, plug that back in. So I think people don't realize. They think e-commerce, again, $30,000 selling the mushroom lamps. Awesome. I just have to figure out how it is. Even if you find that success, or even if you're Udi or you're, Yeti, you still need to be like, things change again. So even if you found success with the Facebook ads, now we're in a different environment now. So you always, no matter, even if you're super successful or you're failing anywhere you're on that spectrum, you still have to be doing that scientific mindset to stay successful in e-commerce So I think, if you're starting out, get comfortable with that concept, because you're going to be going through it even if you become a $100 million brand.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. And the last one is, what's the most important trait that a founder must have for success, and why?
I think it's persistence. I think about this a lot, and I think I've gotten to points in my business before, or businesses that I've been trying to run, where I get to the end of the day and I go, did I give up? No. That's the most. Did I work on it? No. But did I quit? No.
Yeah.
So I think we can be really hard on ourselves, our patience level for finding success, comparing ourselves to other people. So obviously persistence can come from that passion that you have, or there's a bunch of different things that can then feed that persistence. But I think your business will 100% be successful, even if you failed 100 times, 1,000 times, whatever. If you're persistent, it will be successful eventually. So success is inevitable, as long as you don't give up, right? So I think it's just this funny thing where I'm like, if you're persistent, you will become that $100 million brand. You'll achieve all your dreams. It's just about equipping you to be persistent and not burning out before that.
What's the precursor to persistence, do you think?
I think it's passion. I think that fire that sits in your belly. Because to be honest, I've always had this entrepreneurial fire in my belly. And I did a bunch of entrepreneur programs in college and in uni. And I actually came away from them being like, I don't want to do that, because the pain and suffering that these speakers who are coming in and these founders, it sounded terrible. Like, I was like, I don't want to work 24/7. I want to be on an island in like Santorini or something. Like, I don't want to be working 24/7. I don't want to be slaving away for 15 years before I find success. I don't want to be beholden to shit. Like, this is the process they were describing, but they're like, but it's so worth it because I'm so passionate. And I was like, hell no.
Yeah.
And so I actually kind of walked away from this concept of entrepreneurship until it got pulled back in when I was excited about my dog brand, and I got pulled into e-commerce. And now I'm like, okay, I see what it is, but you really do have to have that passion, because otherwise it's just painful. So yeah, I think that that passion buffers you to the pain, and then you'll be able to be persistent. And then it just becomes about not burning out. It just becomes about managing, even if you've got to go underground for a while, if you've got to take a break, you need to buffer that persistence. Because like your passion can be like a shot in the a flash in the pan, and then it's like nothing. So you got to temper it and make it in for the long haul.
Yeah, it's so true. I think I also think like purpose as well, like
yes,
purpose and passion together is like good, because like when passion does waver,
True.
but what keeps you going is that the purpose piece as well. But you got to love what you're doing, I think, for it to last. You know, like what you were saying earlier on, I definitely think that's the truth.
Yeah, I think purpose and passion are 100%.
They're two sides of the
Definitely,
same
exactly.
coin.
Yes.
Elyse, I want to say a massive thank you for coming on the show. I think, you know, I often get excited about having these conversations just because of the depth that we can go to. And I think it just showed how much experience that you've got as well. And you can see the passion coming out in you know, you can always tell when someone's passionate when they've got their own framework and how they think about it. And you can see the excitement coming out. So yeah, a massive thank you. I appreciate your time so much. And I know that the audience found it super valuable. Where can people find you? So if they aren't already following you or they haven't seen your stuff before, where can they actually find you, and what can they look forward to as well? Because I know we were talking about that up there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Like I said, I could talk about this for weeks and weeks. So if anyone wants to come have a chat, I've just relaunched some socials on, it's called Thing Ecommerce on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. You can probably find me there. Otherwise, just Google my name in LinkedIn, send me a message and we can connect. And yes, I will be launching a course in probably about 2 months' time, designed for anyone who's got a product or something they're really passionate about. They don't know anything about e-commerce. That's going to be the program for you to go through and work through these frameworks, and everything I've just described. If it's making your head spin, I've got step-by-step templates and we'll talk through it. So yeah, super passionate about the space. So thanks for letting me chat your ear off about it.
There's a fair chance that we went pretty deep on some things. So there's a fair chance there's a few confused people there, but that's even more reason to keep an eye out for the course. 100%.
Yeah, come have a chat. Let's talk about it.
I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. We'll see you next week.
Yeah, we're golden, baby girl, we're golden. They're about to see us shine, 'cause we're golden.